This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
A save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rangers through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nicoladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
It's gone! It's gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
We want to win. It's Seattle Sounders, bro.
Portland can say cheated.
What was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder Hart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Open Cup seriously.
Welcome to another episode of Nos Arietes, sponsored by Full Pull Wines and our subscribers. We're recording on Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. I am your host, Jeremiah O'Shan. I am joined by my co-host, Aaron Campo, as well as our engineer, Lickett. Just as it seemed we were all getting ready to get excited about this season, the Sounders gave us a 1-2 punch of crappy results. The latest came on Saturday when they dropped a 1-0 decision to the Portland Timbers, a team that we were told could not defend for anything. Now they're looking at a game against the Columbus Crew in a stretch run that is manageable, but still a bit daunting. As we look down the barrel of the 7-game sprint to decision day, Aaron, what do you make of things?
Yeah, it wasn't a great feeling at the end of that one, I would say. Mark and I talked last week about whether or not the Open Cup result had changed the way we felt about the Portland result, because a couple weeks ago when you and I recorded, I think that the consensus was Sounders get past LAFC and into the final of the Open Cup. We don't care what happens down in Portland. And Mark and I's consensus was, well, they didn't do that. So now they need to go win in Portland. And they didn't do that. And I think more than just not getting the result, not getting a win, not getting a point even, to do it in a 1-0 is really, I think, disheartening. I don't think they played terribly. They did create some decent chances. Portland actually defended pretty well, I think. But it was a reminder of the margins that this team is dealing with, where, if a team makes a couple of heroic defensive plays, that can be enough to keep you off the scoreboard. And I think, against a team like Portland that has just been so terrible defensively, it kind of sends you back to the bad old days a little bit. And I'm not saying we're back there. I think that there are a lot of caveats to this game. The Sounders played 3 games in a week. They've played a ton of games lately. They did create good chances. Portland did get a lot of, I think, good luck in the game. The goal they scored was off a deflection. I thought if there was a genuinely encouraging thing, it's that the Sounders did not really look bothered by the Timbers in attack, and the Timbers are a legitimately very good attack and attacking team, and they really didn't create a whole lot themselves. But I would have much rather lost that game 3-2, I think, than 1-0.
Yeah, I went back and rewatched the game. Live, I was really, really frustrated with not just the result, but what I felt like was a kind of feckless offensive performance. And I felt it was important for me to go through and watch the game again. And I will say they were more dangerous on rewatch than I thought that they felt in real time. They, the numbers are not kind to them, I will admit. They didn't create a ton of great scoring chances. they did, they weren't credited with a single big chance, which was the second game in a row that they hadn't had a big chance. That's obviously concerning. But they did create some genuine danger. And it's just that most of that danger came from either set pieces or guys getting beat on the Sounders beating guys on the dribble and then putting a sort of ball into a danger space. Georgie Manungu was by far the sort of revelation in that sense. He was everything that the Timbers could have possibly had. I mean, it was remarkable how good he looked coming off the dribble, and he put some dangerous balls in. So I wouldn't even criticize him for lacking the kind of final product that has been the knock against him. But yeah, it was, at the end of the day, it was a 1-0 loss that felt just so similar to the way this season started, in that there was a vague sense of danger, but no end product, nothing really there. And for the Sounders to drop 2 games in a row, 1-0, just it's a real slam you back down to earth kind of experience, I think.
Yeah, it is, because I think as painful as the loss to LAFC was, as painful as all those losses to LAFC have been, I think everybody has just kind of accepted that they're the bogey team and that the Sounders just aren't getting past them. Right. It's not going to happen this year. They're better. They're a bad matchup. All that. Right. The Timbers are not. I don't think the Timbers are better. And I think the Sounders have shown a lot of progress in the areas where they had concerns in this game. And, they looked good against Minnesota. They looked good against the Galaxy. They looked good against Pumas. There have been all these things that I think really did have people mostly turned around, and they've shown the ability to bounce back from those disappointing losses to LAFC. And so to have a game like this was just a big time letdown. I don't think it's really the end of the world. I mean, it hurts in the table for sure, but I think it's a game they could afford to lose.
It was,
if all things being equal. Going up, with their next one being away to Columbus, certainly that makes the timing less than ideal, I think, to potentially drop 2 in a row. Although who knows, what they're going to do in Columbus. But yeah, it felt a lot worse than I think it realistically is. But that matters, I think, at this point in the year. Like,
it does matter. This is a season that has felt, the vibes have felt off from jump, frankly, and it just as it seemed like it was leveling up in that way. They were in the quarterfinals of the Leagues Cup. They were in the semifinals of the U.S. Open Cup. I don't know if anyone really thought they were going to win Leagues Cup, but there was good feeling around the way they were playing. They beat a couple good teams. You go out of the Leagues Cup, okay, whatever. You win that Minnesota game. You still have the Open Cup to play for. That feels realistic. It feels like maybe this is where we can get over on LAFC. Even if we don't turn around the broad narrative around it, at least we have them where we want them. It's setting up well. We know what happens there. And then the Portland game, again, not a great team, but a team they had already beaten. It was a game that had potential to inject some life into this season. And they just didn't come through. And it does give me pause about where this season is going. I don't know that I have ever looked at this team and thought, oh, they're an MLS Cup contender. But it's a little rough when you realize that's sort of what this season rests on in terms of it being a successful season. And for this to be the 50th anniversary season and us sitting here with 7 games left to go, and it's like, it's really MLS Cup or bust. Like, I don't know what they can do for the rest of the way short of getting to MLS Cup that's going to make this season feel anything less than, like, they could win their last 7 games, which would be great. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But I don't know that if they win their last 7 games and then they go out in the conference finals, I don't know that this season will feel successful.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's one of those things where I think it matters how you're defining your terms, and it's a totally subjective thing, because my success is not your success, is not anybody else's success.
Sure. Yeah.
For me, it's like a lot of it is, did I have a good time watching this team?
Yeah.
And the highs can make up for a lot of lows if they're high enough. But I don't see myself looking back on this season fondly unless they do anything like win MLS Cup. It's because it's going to feel like, well, yeah, I mean, they're kind of set up to play boring soccer that can be effective in a playoff game. So it's not shocking they had a run in the playoffs, but I don't believe this team is a good soccer team. I didn't think the 2016 Sounders were a good soccer team, but winning the MLS Cup made up for a lot of that, right? So if they manage to do that again, hey, great. I'm not gonna complain. I'll look back on it very fondly. But I don't think they're gonna do that. I don't think that they have the thing that made the difference in 2016 was Nico Ladero, and they do not have 2016 Nico Ladero. They just don't have that kind of guy who is going to take over games and will things to happen. And I mean, if they meet LAFC in the playoffs, I would, if I were a gambling man, I would bet my entire 401k on LAFC to win that game, which is probably what the Sounders would need to actually be able to beat them, would be that karmic balance. But they're just kind of a nothing meh sort of team. Like they have good players. They're not a bad soccer team. I still think they probably finish in the top 4 in the West. I think on paper, there have been worse Sounders teams for sure. There have been equally boring or frustrating Sounders teams. So I don't want to make it sound like this has like been the worst season ever by any stretch of the imagination. But I think for a year when there was a lot of, I think, excitement at the beginning of the year, there was a lot of potential with it being the 50th anniversary. Everything pretty much that could have gone poorly has gone poorly, off the field and on. And I think a lot of it was avoidable. You know, we've talked about it to death, and so I don't necessarily want to get into it, but it's just, it really is nothing around the team feels all that fun right now, except for Georgie, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan, hey, you know, we'll talk about that in a second. I do want to just, it feels worth repeating that this season is starting to feel much more like a bridge to something. It's either a bridge to a new era of lowered expectations, or it's sort of a bridge to the next, hopefully positive era. But this feels like a transition. It feels like a transition year, and it did not seem like it had to be that way. Like there was a way to set this season up in a way where even if there was a lot of turnover, it felt good about closing the book. You know, I just recently found out that Brian Schmetzer is going to be out of contract at the end of the year. I don't know what that means. It's entirely possible he'll be re-signed and he'll be back. But that's just another big piece of this team that we don't know. We don't know what's next with it. And this offseason is, I don't think it's hyperbolic at all to say that regardless of how the rest of this season goes, the offseason is going to tell us just a whole lot about where this is going, what the Sounders even want to be.
Yeah,
it's like, it's hard to overstate how big this offseason is, and they can't afford to just wait until the summer and ask everyone to trust them. I think what really has to happen this offseason is the Sounders need to come out with a really clear plan about what are we doing? Where are we trying to go? What are we trying to be? Are the Sounders now a developmental team? Are they a team that expects to win trophies? What are they, and how are we getting there? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that, you know, I maintain the position that I have a lot of frustration with the way the front office seems to be approaching things, with the way ownership seems to be approaching things. But their frustrations, I think I'm coming to the opinion that they're frustrations that I've had for a long time. with the way the Sounders process works, and it's just been sort of exacerbated. Maybe it's gotten worse, but I do think a lot of it is circumstantial. Just the Sounders have never really been in a position where they had multiple club legends sort of falling off a cliff at the end of a super successful era, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like the most likely outcome is the Sounders come out, they make at least 2 major signings in the offseason. They make some other changes. They maybe move some players around. They make some difficult decisions, some painful decisions. And then they, go out and make another major signing in the during the summer window. That's kind of the impression that Craig Weibel gave the team. And by major signings, I mean like a major signing. I mean a Raul Ruidiaz, Nico Ladero caliber signing, adjusted for the modern MLS era, right? I think that that's what they're going to do. And I don't necessarily blame other people for being skeptical of that. I think some of the skepticism goes beyond skepticism into cynicism, doomerism, where people are saying they're not going to sign anybody in the offseason. They're going to pretend like they tried, then maybe they'll sign somebody during the summer. I don't think that's a reasonable position to take. But if they don't deliver or get close to those expectations, it's going to fundamentally change the way I feel about the club and about ownership and about what I think the right next steps for the club are and for ownership are, in a way that will fundamentally change, I think, my relationship with the club, and how I feel about the club as a fan. And I really don't want that to happen. I mean, the Sounders have been a constant in my life for a long time now, through good times and bad. And the highs have far outweighed the lows. And to have the nature of that relationship change so dramatically, where I just don't feel like I can trust them to compete anymore, to do what they need to do to be competitive, would feel really, really bad. And it's just not, I've already lived through that with the Mariners. I don't really want to do it again. And, there was a time in my life where the Mariners were as big a deal, if not bigger deal to me than the Sounders. And that changed when they stopped doing what they needed to do to be competitive, despite having the resources to do it. And I don't want that to happen to the Sounders. And I will say for sure that even if they try to get signings over the line and they're willing to spend and they're committed to doing it and they don't do it, it's not going to be that much better, because you can't say, well, I'm willing to accept Craig saying, look, we had a budget we had to work with. We weren't willing to add players just for the sake of adding them. So we thought it was better not to do anything. I don't necessarily think that's the right approach, but I can understand it in the context of that window. That's not going to fly in the offseason.
No,
it is not going to fly. So you have to deliver. You have to. And yeah, it's a big offseason. I think it's pretty hard to deny that it's the biggest offseason the club's ever had.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening. Yeah, I look back at the other seasons that we would maybe put in this category. I would probably put 2013 in a similar category, probably put 2015 in a similar category, where they were seasons that had promise, but ultimately nothing to show for it. I guess maybe even last year you could put in that. And I think that's the other thing that is tough, is I don't know that they've ever had back-to-back seasons where it felt like there was no real progress. Like, right. I guess last year you could argue there was progress in a very specific way of figuring out a way to play. Yeah. I do think they made some progress in terms of finding a style. And I guess to some degree they've maintained that, but there was no trophies. They didn't win even the Cascadia Cup. They made the playoffs. They were competitive. I think we insisted all year that they were a team that was on its day as good as anyone in the West last year. But it was also, fairly pointed out that it was a down year for the West. Yeah. And this year has been, it's not that there's been no positive moments. They've looked like a decent team for months, which is great. Like they've had some fun games at home, which I think is something that we had begged to happen again.
For sure.
So, yeah. I don't want to make it sound like this has been a horrible year from head to tail, but it's not there's not been real progress. And this was the 50th anniversary year. I think it's worth remembering. There was a lot of hype and attention that went into this being the 50th anniversary season, and that has fallen pretty flat for the most part. I don't know that there has been a single moment this year where the 50th anniversary felt really big and inclusive and celebratory. Like I don't know that we ever got that really this year.
It's been an afterthought. It's been
it felt like an afterthought.
So poorly handled. It was so hyped up. They came out with all this like 50th anniversary merch. They had a new brand identity. We were promised that it was going to be a big deal, and it never was.
No,
and I think that's just
that's controllable. That's the thing.
Yes,
that's not the whims of matches. This is stuff where people in the front office can literally pull levers. And I am sure, I know that they've had some events for, like the Rave Gala. I wasn't there. From everything I heard, it was great, but that's like, those are barely even season. There are some season ticket holders but that's not even an event that's like beyond the average fan. That's not something the average fan is engaging in. It's so there's been a few things like that, I suppose, but in terms of like things that the average season ticket holder, let alone the average fan, can like touch and feel and have a sense of connection with the club, I don't know that there's been anything like that. I mean, you look at the Ring of Honor, which should have been this huge deal, and instead, it ended up being like a banner that you go print at Kinko's or whatever.
Yeah,
and it does look better now. They have it on there's an LED board. Hey, good. Why not wait to unveil it until then?
Yeah,
like,
it's crazy. Do it? It's because this is stuff that they used to be good at,
right?
And that's the thing that's so baffling to me is it's just like you used to be good at creating a good game day atmosphere. You used to be good about marketing. You used to be good at putting aside the fact that they used to be good on the field too.
Right.
There's all this stuff they've always been good at. And I know that they notice that attendance is bad relative to what we've come to expect.
Yeah.
I know that they know that the results aren't good enough. I know they heard the boos at full time against LAFC at Starfire. They're aware of this stuff. And the fact that they don't seem really all that committed to fixing any of it is just is crazy to me. It's absolutely baffling to me.
And I know there's a lot of problems that you say you can't just throw money at it. It's this is a little bit like you could throw money at it. Like, yes. If you just come out and say, we have a $20 million transfer budget or whatever, or maybe not $20 million, but we have $20 million to go out and sign new players. God, that would turn things around, right? That would at least give people hope that, like, and I feel like that's kind of what they have. They're at the point now, in 2018, Garth talked about, we were at a real low point in the summer of 2018. I don't know how many people remember this, but 2018 was pacing to be a all-time epic failure of a season. It was awful. And at one point, right before the transfer window opened, Garth came out and said, effectively, we are going to have a 8-figure budget to go and find another designated player. And of course he delivered. That was
right.
That was when they
and
said
there were for sure people who said he was lying.
For sure. Yeah, there were absolutely
like
people,
a not insignificant amount of them.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. But there was it created the sense of like, something's going to happen. We got to go do something here. And I almost think we're at the point now where the Sounders have to sort of go out and do that. And I don't frankly know if they have a budget yet for. Actually, I'm pretty sure they don't have a transfer. They have not articulated within the front office how much money they have to spend yet, that's a concern. Now, the expectation is there's going to be real money, that they're going to go out and make a big signing. They have money in the budget. How much is obviously a big variable, because if all you have is, let's just say $5 million and that's all in $5 million, call it. Okay, so maybe you can only go out and sign a free or something. That's one kind of player. If you have $10 million to go out and say, that's a whole different kind of player, right?
Right.
And so these are the things they probably need to work out before they get too far down this thing. I don't know.
If you only have the budget to go sign a free, then we're not getting shit until the summer.
Maybe. I mean, that's possible. But these are the things they need to come out and say, right? Like they need to be really clear about what I'll be clear. I don't know that's I don't know that, right? I'm just throwing things out there. But that would be something that they need to say. They need to go out and set the expectation. Yes. We have money for we don't have a transfer budget right now, but we do, or whatever. We have $5 million to sign players. We have $10 million. We have whatever. Like,
right.
The best thing that Garth did at Atlanta this last year, in a way, was to say, hey, we have $50 million. They didn't spend all that, admittedly, and people are really mad. But I do think it's you're being honest with your fans. I think there's got to be some level of appreciation. Of course, then he went out and fired Carlos Boca. I mean, these are the stakes, right? These are what happens when you. Yeah,
because he basically didn't come out and say we're going to spend $50 million, but he certainly implied they were going to spend a big chunk of it, and then the guy in charge of spending it didn't get it done.
Right. Yeah.
And then he should have gotten fired. You know.
Right.
Like if Craig Weibel has a significant amount of money to spend this summer, and I think we've both been pretty staunch defenders of that he should at least have the chance to show what he can do. Mm-hmm. If he can't deliver, he probably shouldn't be around anymore.
Well, if he doesn't have the faith of, like, it's also possible that Adrian just doesn't want to give him the money to spend because he doesn't have faith. Like, this is possible. Sure. Well, then what Adrian has to do is hire someone he trusts.
Yeah.
Like you can't just not do, like, you can't, this is not a way to operate a team.
Right. Adrian used to be the GM. He could go back to being the GM if he wants to. I don't think anybody wants that. I don't think Adrian wants that. I don't want that. I don't think anybody wants that.
Right.
But he either needs to do it or let the guy who he hired to do it do it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Or find somebody else that can work as that intermediary to, to be able to advocate for Craig, whatever it is. But you got to get something done. And I agree with you. Like, I think it's a major red flag if they can't go out and buy a player in the winter, because they chose not to do it when the free agents were available, the good ones this summer. Right. They chose not to do it, and they chose not to make. So you need to be able to deliver in the winter. But I would rather have that expectation set of, like, look, we're probably not going to be able to make a transfer until next summer, or we're not going to be able to, pay DP money until next summer. So we're going to make some TAM signings, whatever. We're going to improve the roster, but the big improvement will come next summer. I think that sucks, but you're at least setting the expectations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It sucks. Like, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm going to be thrilled with it. But if they really believe they can sort of, I mean, then there is a different kind of pressure. It's like, well, then you need to be able to put out a roster that can actually muddle through the first 2/3 of the season.
Yeah. Which they don't have right now. They straight up,
they don't have based on who's leaving. That's for sure.
Yeah, they're playing in the Club World Cup. Do you care? Do you care about the Club World Cup? Like
they can't. No, I agree with you. They can't afford they can't go into the Club World Cup with the roster they have today, minus a few players that are going to be leaving presumably this offseason.
It feels to me, and by going out and making big signings in the winter, they could totally change this perception. It feels to me like when Adrian commits to spending the money, when it's time to spend the money, he always makes the funds available, and they tend to knock the signings out of the park. They hit on their big DP signings, and I think that that's commendable. And I think to some degree, the conservative approach is responsible for that. But I also think that, and this is just perception based on the way these things have gone in the past and are going now, that the organizational philosophy is we have our long-term spending strategy on when we're going to replace our DPs, when we're going to make our big signings, and we're not going to deviate from that, whether it's the 50th anniversary, whether we're playing in the Club World Cup, whatever. This is our strategy. These are our long-term goals, and it just doesn't seem like they're willing to pivot for that from that, which I just think is really short-sighted.
I agree. So before we get out of here, we're already doing a little bit of a shorter episode. Let's do a quick look ahead to this game, and maybe the Crew are going to be missing 7 players for this game.
Pretty crazy. No.
They're missing 6 of those players are starters, and then the 7th player is their backup goalkeeper. So they're missing their top 2 goalkeepers and 5 starting outfield players. This is going to be now. I will say the Crew have the depth to still be very competitive in this game. Diego Rossi is going to be on this team. Ramirez is still their goal. Is probably going to be starting at forward. Nagby is here. They've got players, right? And by the way, it wasn't so different when the Crew faced the Sounders in the in MLS Cup in 2020, and we all know what happened there. I'm not gonna bring that juju in here. What am I talking about? Sounders will be missing 2 players. Sounders are going to be out without Nuhu. They're also going to be without Obed Vargas. What's your expectation for this game? And because I would imagine before you knew they had 7 players, you were like, whatever, they're not going to win this game. But I don't know how you feel.
I mean, the Sounders are a weird enough team that I'm never going to say I feel confident that I know it's going to happen, but I definitely think that the circumstances of the game make me feel, a little better about it. Them being without so many players.
They're sucking us back in.
Yeah. I mean, that's what they do. The Crew, we've talked about how terrible a matchup LAFC are for the Sounders. I think the Crew, even though they have a lot of similarities to LAFC, are a better matchup for the Sounders.
I agree. Their style of play is less likely to frustrate. The Sounders might get beaten to the ground. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's going to be it'll be a different kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean the Crew do have the best defense in the league, and I think that is a huge factor. That gives me pause. And I think that their defense is as good as it is. Obviously, the players are a huge part of it. Players are always the most important factor, but I think organizationally and systemically, they're just really hard to score on. Yeah. Similar to how Brian Schmetzer teams are always hard to score on, no matter who's there. I think that the Crew are the same way. And so I think really the more realistic hope is a point from this game, but I think a point in Columbus feels great. And I don't care how many people are missing.
Yeah.
They have lost 1 game at home this year. And, I think it's crazy to expect the Sounders to hand them their second loss. But I do think a point is totally doable here. I think it has the potential to be one of the most boring games you've ever seen in your life. It kind of that Atlanta game, the notorious Atlanta game, that was the 0-0. I don't even remember when that was. Somehow, was it 2021? I don't know.
Which game?
But it was the Sounders in Atlanta had a 0-0.
Oh, that was 2019, I believe.
2019. Anyway,
right.
Was it?
No, 2018 maybe? 2018 was the year. Yeah, it was 2018. That was, Rui Diaz was, it was 2018.
And it was because it was after like the World Cup final, I think, right? And so people were like, oh, you're going to go from watching the best soccer in the world to then you have to watch that. I think it could be a game like that potentially. Or it could not. Who knows? The Sounders have surprised us so many times this year. They are legitimately good on set pieces now, which is always, a wild card in games like these. If they can get a goal from a set piece early enough, I trust their ability to weather the storm, and at least ride it to a 1-1 or something. I don't know. So I genuinely have no idea what to expect.
I don't either.
Yeah. A win would be... It would make me feel so much better about the loss in Portland. I wouldn't feel great about it, but I would feel much better. But I think most likely we're going to have to wait until, for a couple of weeks before we can really feel all that great about things.
Yeah. I would agree with that. And I don't know. Let's put it this way: if we think the Sounders have any chance of winning MLS Cup, which right now I don't give us a great chance of doing, they probably need to figure out a way to get a result on the road against the Crew when they are missing 7 players. Because I guarantee if they were to play an MLS Cup, it would be at least this tough of a matchup.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. They're going to have to beat a team as good as the Crew minus 7 players in the playoffs, right? But I think getting a point from this game and then going into 3 straight games at home against beatable opponents. And really the rest of the season, I think after this game, the toughest game left is Colorado, and the Sounders historically have been pretty good in Colorado. And I think Colorado are not as good as maybe their record would indicate. But, the Sounders have only beaten a team above them in the table on a technicality at this point. So it's, who knows? I really want to believe that's just kind of a fluky thing, but it's getting tougher and tougher to maintain that position, I guess.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that's probably a good place to call this. Aaron, thank you, of course, for doing this. I don't know why I say that at the end of the show. Why did I say that? Thank you. You're doing the show, Aaron. This is your show. Thank you to our sponsors.
Still nice of you to say.
Yeah, Full Pool Wines. Thanks to Lickit for producing this thing. Let us know how it sounds, because we are using a new software to record. So if you have any feedback about the way it sounds, I'd be curious to hear what that might be.
Absolutely.
So all that said, I'm Jeremiah Oshan, signing off for Aaron Campo. This is No Study at This. Remember, you'll never get alone.
We love you. Let's win another one!